So it is a tale as old as time, or at least as long as sim racing. You've gotten into the hobby, you picked up an entry-level wheel, and you just feel like you're starting to become a little bit held back by your equipment. What are you gonna upgrade first? Now, a great driver once said, "It's amazing how many drivers, even at the Formula One level, think that the brakes are for slowing the car down." So that was, of course, Mario Andretti, a Formula One world champion, IndyCar world champion, and of course, the brakes are primarily for slowing a car down. Just as the gas pedal helps you speed up the car and go faster, and the clutch pedal helps you switch gears. But your pedal inputs are actually crucial for also helping you turn the car. Both the gas and the brake pedal can help you rebalance the car or keep it in balance as you're moving through a corner and the different phases of the corner. And the clutch pedal and shifting gears can actually help you get extra rotation too. And that is why I and a lot more experienced sim racers recommend upgrading your pedals as one of your first upgrades to your sim racing setup. That is before wheelbases, that is before shifters and cockpits and a lot of other elements like button boxes. So now we move back onto the main subject of the video, which is the Thrustmaster T-LCM pedal set. And too long didn't watch. If this is in your price range at $200, this should absolutely be on your short list of pedals to pick up. So what is so attractive about these pedals? Well, it's really all in the name. The T, of course, stands for Thrustmaster. The LC is to indicate that it uses a load cell sensor in the brake pedal, and the M is to indicate that the other two pedals, the gas and the clutch, utilize magnetic Hall effect sensors in order to sense the position of the pedal. All right, so let's jump into the specs for this guy. In terms of price, they have a $200 manufacturer suggested retail price. Unfortunately, Thrustmaster had to increase the general price of most of their products. I've still seen these on sites like Amazon for $200 at the moment, but they can be as much as $250. Used, I would expect to see them around $180 to $200. Unfortunately, with people kind of scalping gear right now, that's the state of things. For connectivity, you can use these on either console or PC. For pedal resolution, we have 16 bits all around on all three pedals. If you are going through USB to a PC, the gas of clutch with their Hall effect sensors have over 65,000 steps, and the brake cell with its load cell also has 16 bits. If you are on console and going through the wheelbase, you'll be limited to 12 bits or 4,096 steps, but generally anything over 10 bits is considered very, very good. The load cell in the brake is rated at 100 kilograms. As far as I can see, that's not something Thrustmaster advertised, but I've seen some people online who seem to have looked up the actual sensor, and that seems to be what it's rated at. In terms of construction, you can see that it's very much evolved from the T3PA pedals. It is a single unit with injection molded plastic shell. Inside, we do actually have a ballast to counterbalance the front of the pedals. This should help a little bit to help make sure it doesn't tip over as easily when you're pushing on the pedals. Over the top, it has a metal diamond heel plate, which I think looks pretty good and breaks up the overall black plastic kind of look of the base of the pedals. Each of the pedal arms are a single piece cast aluminum. The pedal faces are a brushed steel, which I think look pretty good. The overall weight of these pedals is around 5 kilograms or 11 pounds in freedom units. And the rough dimensions are approximately 33 by 38 centimeters or 13 by 15 inches. In terms of adjustability, the pedal faces are movable up, down, left, and right to get spacing. If you want to do some heel toe, or if you don't really worry about the clutch, you can move the gas and the brake into a position that works a little bit better for you. You can also adjust the tilt or rake of the pedal faces utilizing the included plastic spacers. And of course, there are multiple spring configurations and spacers for preload that you can use with the load cell brake pedal to give you the resistance and feeling you want from the brake. For mounting, we have some anti-slip pads to help if you are on a hard surface, not having the pedal set slide forward when you're pushing on the pedals. There are also 5 metal hard mounting points, and this includes a traceable hole template. So let's talk about those Hall effect sensors in the gas and and clutch really quickly. Over the last 10 years, we've seen Hall effect or magnetic sensors replace the either optical encoders or in the old days potentiometers as the standard for the wheel rotation sensor in most wheelbases, and Thrustmaster has taken that technology and applied it to the pedals. Again, they were the first manufacturer of the big three, Fanatec, Thrustmaster, and Logitech, to have that configuration. We now know that the Fanatec CSL pedals will have Hall effect sensors replacing the CSL Elite potentiometers, but everything below this pedal set in terms of price or bundles are generally going to have potentiometers in them. Potentiometers are the most common type of sensors used in especially lower end and even a lot of higher end pedals, and they're typically prone to having a lot of issues because they are electromechanical, meaning they have actual moving parts and brushes brushing up against contacts inside of them. So over time they can get dust in them, they can get grease in them, they can just kind of short out and or have the brushes get messed up and just not work correctly. And if you've used a lower end set of pedals over a long time, that's probably an issue you've run into. Hall effect sensors read a change in a magnetic field as a pedal is moved. A permanent magnet either rotates or is moved closer and further away from that Hall effect sensor, and relative to the distance that the pedal is moved, it essentially puts out a higher or lower voltage that's read by a MCU and processed to determine what state the pedal is in. So instead of having an electrical mechanical part that's actually, brushing up against each other and could possibly wear out, you've got a more solid state setup here, which should hopefully mean that it is more reliable. And now onto the star of the show, which is the load cell sensor in the brake pedal. This is the least expensive pedal set you can get that I'm aware of with a load cell sensor in the brake pedal. The Fanatec CSL pedals will eventually feature a load cell upgrade you can buy, and the price point they're aiming at is around $200. But as of taping, it is not out yet. What a load cell sensor does is reads the pressure applied to the brake pedal as opposed to the either linear or rotational distance traveled by the pedal. This allows you to kind of modulate your braking based on the amount of pressure you put into the pedal instead of trying to modulate, slight millimeters of rotational or linear distance. And generally, load cell pedals and brakes are much closer to how real cars' brake systems and brake pedals actually work. If you look at telemetry from a real racing car, the actual brake percentage that you're seeing in the telemetry is the amount of force put into the brakes. That modulating of pressure is what a lot of lower end pedal sets are trying to emulate with things like the progressive spring in the G923, the rubber stopper which came on the G29 and G920, and even the conical rubber mod that we saw on the T3PA pedals. When you press down on those brakes, as you get to a certain distance, it becomes much harder to depress them and you have to apply more pressure over time, and it's a way of trying to emulate that load cell or real brake hydraulic system that we have in real cars. Some of these systems do a much better job than others, but really, like I said, they're trying to emulate things. So when you get into a lot of higher end, kind of more realistic sims like Assetto Corsa, ACC, iRacing, R-Factor, Race Room, the difference between locking up and flying off the track and making it around a corner and trail braking successfully and changing the weight of the car can be a few percentages. And when you're trying to just make a millimeter change, that can be really, really difficult, but humans are able to modulate that pressure a lot more easier. You've probably seen the common thing of touching your different fingers and pressing into your thumb muscle and then press on the stake to determine how well done a stake is. You're not measuring how many millimeters into the stake you're able to press. You're measuring that rough pressure. Really weird analogy, but that's where my mind always goes when I'm trying to explain why it is often better to modulate pressure instead of distance. With that ability to modulate the brakes and control the balance of the car, trail brake into corners, you're going to be able to just control the car better. You're going to be able to brake later and carry more speed into the turn and really just dance on the edge of traction without jumping over it. A lot of people talk about the limit of traction as somewhat of a band, and when you don't have particularly good pedals or you're newer, that it's a razor thin band, and if you slip over the edge or the limit of traction, you often end up in the gravel or in a wall. But as you get better braking and better pedal feel, that band can oftentimes increase so you can play in that band without immediately tripping over it and flying off of the track. Drivers who switch to low tail pedals often say that they're able to brake more confidently, they're able to go wheel to wheel, knowing that they're not going to lock up and, you know, ram into another car, and generally just more consistency. So let's talk a little bit about resolution. Both the magnetic Hall effect sensors and the low tail sensor are going to offer a lot higher resolution than what you're going to see in lower and entry level pedals. A higher resolution means that there are more discrete steps or values in the full range of the pedal. The potentiometers in a lot of lower end pedals are either 8-bit or 10-bit, which offer 255 or 256 discrete steps. With the T-LCM pedals, you're getting as much as 16 bits of resolution, which offers something crazy like 64,000 discrete steps or values that you can modulate between. Now, most people consider anything beyond 10 bits to be, you know, diminishing returns, so to speak. You're not going to be able to hit all 64,000 discrete values in there, but overall, you know, if it's not costing very much more, I don't think that that's a bad thing. And moving from some 8-bit pedals, which I think had fairly weak return springs, up to something with a lot more resolution, I did feel like I noticed a difference in terms of having smooth throttle response, being able to let off the throttle and not have kind of somewhat jumpy changes in values. All right, now on to mounting them or getting them set up. One thing to note with these and a lot of low tail pedals is that generally the force required to depress them is going to be greater than potentiometer based pedals. That can lead to some difficulties in terms of especially having them on the floor, be it carpet or hardwood, and keeping the pedals from skidding across your carpets or tipping over on whatever surface that you're using them on. And that's even with the weakest kind of spring settings in the pedals. I found it a little bit difficult to depress the brake while sitting in a standard size chair and not have them tip over or go sliding backwards. Now, there are a number of ways that people in the sim world have gotten around this problem with all sorts of pedals throughout the ages, and most or many of those are probably going to work with the T-LCMs as well. But even if you get them to be very static, if you're at a desk and you're in a rolling wheeled chair, you're going to run into another problem, and that's your chair wanting to slide back. So a lot of people do stuff like even put shoes onto the wheels of their chair to prevent it from sliding, or you can just grab kind of a folding chair, but that's not going to be as comfortable. But in order to get the most out of this pedals, being able to use the full range of the springs and get the higher brake force, I'm going to recommend that you use these with some type of a rig, be it a wheel stand, a pedal deck, or a full-on aluminum or other type of rig. That's going to help you be able to apply the most force into the pedals and be able to modulate them and not have to worry about anything moving backwards or forward or sliding around nearly as much. Now, I have a Lab GT1 Evo full-on aluminum extrusion rig. That's my preferred way to race these days, but I do also like to use all the sim racing equipment that I can at a desk to give people an idea of what that's like, because a lot of people can't have a full-on rig in their setup. So what I ended up having to do to get the most out of these pedals at my desk was build a simple pedal deck. For around $60, I was able to get some MDF, some 2020 extrusion, some joints, and 3D print some parts along with hardware, and make a pedal deck that made it like absolutely great to use these pedals. It's completely static. There are some ones that you can buy online, and I'm going to recommend at least a wheel stand. If you want to spend a little bit more money, for around $120, you can get a lot of the wheel stands, which will genuinely grab onto the carpet or hard floor a lot better than the standalone pedals will. For making that pedal deck and putting it onto my rig, I absolutely loved the template and startup quick guide that Thrustmaster included with the pedals. I think that should be standard for any pedals sold. For most pedals, you have to go onto their website, download a PDF that had a template that you have to print out on multiple pages, tape it together, do a bunch of measuring. There's none of that you have to do. You place the template down on your surface, either align it with the existing holes, mark holes to drill them out, and screw it in. I love that. I think that should be standard on all pedals, and hopefully, you know, other people will be influenced by this, as it makes it, you know, really, really simple to get the pedals hooked up to any type of rig or pedal deck that you want. Now, ideally, you want to use all 5 of the hard metal mounting screws if possible, but if you don't want to drill out in order to accommodate that, and you know your pedal deck or setup doesn't have the pre-drilled holes, you can use 3. I would recommend using the front 2 and the middle one, as that'll prevent the pedals from being able to tilt back the most. You'll basically be pushing down into the bass instead of pulling the bass up. If you use the back 2 and the center one, you can notice a little bit of lift of the pedals. So use at least 3, use all 5 if you can. On my Lab GT1 Evo, I wasn't able to align 5 holes, so I ended up drilling out the center hole, and again, the template was really, really useful for that. I was able to align the other 4 holes to get them so that I could screw all of those in, and then draw out the place where I needed to drill the center hole, drill that out, and hook everything up. Pretty simple. There is also an optional adapter that you can pick up from Thrustmaster if you have some type of rig or setup that has the holes for the older Thrustmaster pedals. You can get this adapter and it will adapt it so that these pedals can be mounted with that old hole alignment, and you're good to go there. All right, moving on to setup for both PC and console. It was quite easy. I got it working on both in little to no time. You're going to utilize the USB cable on PC or the RJ12 cable if you're going to go through the Wheelbase on console, and really that's it. After you have it hooked up, you can put the pedals either under your desk or onto your rig or wheel stand, and there's not much else to it. It is recommended that you use a PC to calibrate them using the Thrustmaster calibration tool. Regardless if you're going to be using them primarily on PC or console, you want to do that. In that downloadable software, you're going to be able to adjust things like dead zones on all of the pedal, and specifically on the brake, you're going to be able to adjust that brake force or sensitivity, which kind of controls the multiplier of how hard you have to press on the brake pedal in order to reach the full actual brake force of the pedal. If you're going to use the pedal on console through your Wheelbase, you want to make sure that you upgrade the firmware on the Wheelbase as well and put it into the correct mode to be able to read the pedals. There's a different mode for these current gen pedals and the T3 PAs, and this is all in the documentation on Thrustmaster support site for the pedals. They walk you through the whole process of getting that done, and it's pretty straightforward. So I was primarily using these pedals along with the Thrustmaster T300 Wheelbase with a couple of their different wheel rims on both PC and on console. I actually put out a couple of videos talking about kind of my first impressions driving an iRacing and GT Sport. I'll have links to those in the description and also in the recommended videos. In GT Sport, I did a bunch of arcade races, and I also did all of the driving lessons or driving school with this setup, going through the T300 Wheelbase, and I gotta say they felt absolutely great. Now, you are restricted in the resolution to 12 bits when you're going through the Wheelbase, but I didn't notice that very, very much at all. In fact, coming from the G29 8-bit or 255 step setup and potentiometers, I felt like it just felt a little bit smoother. I had a great time playing GT Sports. It's not my primary game, but I've played them all throughout the years, and playing them now on a wheel with pedals is the way I would prefer to play them all the time. If you're on console and you have a Thrustmaster Wheelbase, it's kind of a no-brainer. Pick up these pedals. If they come out with better pedals in the future, maybe look at those as well. But these are the best pedals I think you could use without any extra hassle of using anything like a drive hub if you're playing on a Thrustmaster Wheelbase on console. So moving on to PC, of course you're going to want to hook these up through the USB. If you're on PC, you could go through the Wheelbase, but again, it's going to limit your resolution, I believe, so I don't know why you would want to do that. I first jumped right into iRacing. That's my most raced sim right now, and I'm not the fastest, I'll definitely admit that. I immediately noticed that I needed and wanted the stiffest brake possible, so I put in both the red springs and all of the washers to get the stiffest brake. and it was still kind of on the side of not enough for me. I would like it if I could get it even stiffer. I think there are some third-party elastomer or 3D printed springs that you can buy that I've seen people put in, but with the base springs, for me personally, I wish it would get a little bit stiffer. But that said, coming from the Logitech G29 pedals, it was night and day better, I have to say. I would expect that, but I immediately felt more confident on the brakes. I raced the MX-5, Mazda Cup a lot, the Ferrari GT3, the fixed GT3 series with multiple cars, the TCR, and most of these cars have very different braking characteristics. They also have different weight distribution in front, and you know, mid rear and front rear, so that can throw you for a loop. Generally, I'd say I just felt more confident. I felt like I was more in control of the car. I felt a lot more consistent, particularly in high-speed corners where you're, you know, kind of trying to control the brake to control the weight of the car. I used to have a lot of problems with, you know, mid-rear cars like the Ferrari just spinning out in a high-speed corner where I'm kind of trail braking to try to keep the weight on the front wheels. I would either over brake and spin out, send the rear of the car around, or I would kind of under brake and understeer, you know, kind of off to the track. And that's not to say I don't ever spin cars out. I still spin out, but I feel like now I'm kind of just more aware of, okay, this is why I spent out. I can look at the telemetry, think about how much force I felt like I was putting into the brake, and make adjustments from there. Whereas with the G29 pedals, I often found myself kind of just wondering, okay, what did I do wrong there? So to kind of sum things up, let's go over some general pros and cons. For the pros, we have the price, $200 for a 3-pedal set. With this nice set of features, it's really the only pedal set on the market right now that has the load cell, Hall effect sensors in the other 2 pedals. We have yet to see the new Fanatic load cell upgrade, how much it's going to cost and how it performs. So really for $200, this is the only option you have right now. Another pro is the connectivity. You got the standalone USB for PC. You can also use it on either console if you have a compatible wheelbase, either something like the TX or the T300. This is the best option for console drivers using a Thrustmaster wheelbase. Another pro is the adjustability. You can adjust the pedal faces up, down, left, and right, and the angle. You can mix and match the springs and the washers to get the general stiffness and progression and preload that you like. And it's very easy to do this with the pedals attached to a rig, wheel stand, or pedal deck, which can't be said for all other pedal sets. The software and calibration, I'm gonna say, is also a pro. Nice graphics to help indicate what the different settings are doing, and very straightforward. All right, now moving on to the cons, we're gonna start out with the stiffness. This is kind of a double-edged sword. Because of the stiffness, it can be a little difficult to use these pedals without a rig, wheel stand, or pedal deck. So some people are going to have to drastically reduce the pedal force in order to use them. But at the same time, I personally would like an even stiffer brake pedal if that were possible. So it's in a bit of a weird place where it's a bit too stiff to use on the floor, but not stiff enough on the rig for me personally. Another con I'm gonna mention is it does have a bit of play. There's some left to right play on the pedals. It's been noted by other reviewers, but really in use, I didn't find it detrimental whatsoever. I didn't feel like I messed up on any braking or doing any heel toe shifting or anything like that because of the play. I've used them for, I don't know, I'm gonna guess about 75 to 100 hours now, and there's no sign of any type of wear in terms of the play that makes me worried that they wouldn't last even longer. So that's always kind of hard to know how things are gonna last over an extended period of time. So getting to the conclusion, if you're gonna upgrade your pedals, these should be on your short list. The $200 price point is great. If you're on console with the Thrustmaster wheelbase, it's kind of no other option for you to be able to upgrade from something like the T3PA pedals, but these are a great upgrade from those T3PA pedals, as well as the pedals that come with the other lower end wheels like the Logitech G29 or G923. So that's just it. Hope you guys liked this long formatted video. That's the style of video I do, very in-depth. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and if you have any experience with these pedals, let me know what you think of them. You can also feel free to help other people who have questions out. I'd love it if you can kind of get this wrinkled into like a little bit of a community where people are helping give other advice, because I can't experience what everyone else out there is experiencing. So, you know, getting other words of wisdom from other people is highly recommended. do your research. If you can find a store that has these set up in a demo pod or something like that, definitely go out there and try them. If you have a friend or somebody in a local racing league or something like that that has them and you can get your feet on them, that's the best way for you to determine whether or not they're going to be the right pedal for you. But thank you very much for watching this video. I've got a lot of other sim racing related content planned, including a lot of products from another brand that you guys might be excited to see, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you haven't, like the video if you found it helpful, share it with friends who are wondering about this pedal set and if it's the pedal for them. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next one. Peace.